Thank you guys for hosting this virtual meeting. It's what we are all doing. I'm amazed that anyone would want to spend more time with Zoom. So thank you. Thank you for sharing your time. Thank you for listening. I hope you have questions afterwards. And as always, if you think this was an interesting presentation, that maybe there was good content and you know someone who wasn't here today, I'll be happy to send you the PowerPoint. So on the first slide, you have my email address, linda@lindarising.org. I'm happy to connect with you on LinkedIn. If there's research that I mention that you'd like to hear more about, in particular papers that I cite, I'll be happy to send you those as well. So at the end, that is not the end. The end is the beginning for a lot of conversations that we can have over email, or I'd be happy to send you any information. So this has to do with your brain. That's really what I like to talk about. And I think for me, it all started with an interesting book that was written by someone who won the Nobel Prize in 2002. So if I could see you, I would ask you if you've heard of the book, Thinking Fast and Slow. And then I would ask you, did you buy the book, Thinking Fast and Slow? And then I would ask you, did you read the first chapter, maybe? Did you make it all the way through, Thinking Fast and Slow? It's a difficult book. And I know most people either don't read real books anymore, or they were discouraged because it's a long book. It's full of lots of science, so it's not an easy read. If you'd like to know more about the book, more than what we're going to talk about today, just go to YouTube, search on Linda Rising, Thinking Fast and Slow, and I can give you a pretty good overview. We're just going to talk a little bit about what's in the book today. Kahneman proposes a very simple model for your brain and how it works. He says there are two pieces or modules to your brain. We don't have time to go into all of the details. We're just going to look a little bit, an overview. The two pieces are called System 1 and System 2. System 1 is the unconscious mind. It requires almost no energy. It never sleeps. System 2, well, it's pretty much the conscious mind. It's the part that wakes up when you wake up. System 1, we know, has been with us from the very beginning. System 2, in an evolutionary sense, is newer. We know that System 1 is an amazingly powerful part of your brain. It can multitask. In fact, right now, there seems to be no limit to the number of things that System 1 can do. System 2, on the other hand, cannot multitask. It's very linear. It's very slow. It's the logical, rational, slow part of your brain. Whereas System 1 can handle multiple tasks. It's the creative, the innovative part of your brain. It remembers your version of everything, everything you've ever read, everything you've ever heard. The problem is, of course, it's unconscious. We can't really reach in and communicate with it that ask it questions, have it help us out. But research now is showing us there are some techniques that will help us, even if we can't access it directly. So researchers have said in the past that your mind, these two pieces, were a little bit like an iceberg. You know what an iceberg looks like. There's the piece below the water. That's the huge piece. They said, well, that's really the unconscious or system one, whereas the piece above, the smaller visible piece, that's system two. Well, that's changing. And now researchers say, not quite, not quite. Do you see this little tiny snowball that's sitting on top of the mountain above the water? That little snowball, that's your conscious mind. That's system two. The rest of it above water and below the water, that is system one. In fact, there are some cognitive scientists that wonder, why do we even have system two? What's the point? It's so inadequate. It's so slow. But all day, every day, in everything we do, that's what we think thinking is using that very slow, deliberate, linear part of our brain. Now, a lot of people who have read Thinking Fast and Slow come away with the impression that system one is flawed. Yes, that's true. It has a whole host of what we could call cognitive biases. And if you want to Google on cognitive bias, you can come up with a long list of flaws in system one thinking. Indeed, those are all true, and those are hardwired. There is absolutely nothing we can do about it. So yes, system one has flaws. I think these are the three worst. This is a short talk, so we don't have time to go through them. Confirmation bias, cognitive dissonance, and native realism are the worst of our biases. Yes, that's true. But system one also contains all our experience, all our expertise, everything we've ever seen, everything we've ever read, everything we've ever heard, and we don't use it. We don't use it to solve problems. Of course, system two is a useful part of our brain. It is the part that is associated with concentrated effort. It takes an enormous amount of energy, and it cannot run for a very long period of time. In fact, you're using your system two now. And you will find that if you don't consciously take a break, it'll do it for you. It cannot run for more than 50 minutes maximum. And then it will zone out. You will do what's called daydreaming or mind wandering. It cannot focus for long periods of time. So when people tell me that they sat in front of their computers and worked for 13 hours without taking a break, I say, you're wrong. You did take a break. You just weren't aware of it. And wouldn't it have been better if you had been aware and if you had consciously managed that limited resource better? You would have been better. Your solutions would have been better. So my rule now is don't do it. There are so many things where we waste our conscious, limited system two effort. I found this interesting statistics that Professionals spend an average of 9 minutes every day choosing what to wear. One of the things I love about these remote events is I don't have to get dressed. You don't know what I'm wearing. I just happened to pick up this t-shirt because it was on top this morning, and I know you don't care. And I don't either. Isn't that wonderful? I have saved myself an enormous amount of time, but not having to worry about what I'm wearing. Now, some people think it's important. And I'm not saying that what I think is important is what you think is important. What I am saying is you should prioritize your use of System 2 and stop wasting time on things that are not important. Prioritize. Use your limited resource in an intelligent way. Well, before I was a computer scientist, I was a mathematician. And I'm sure that you had an experience like this. I was working on a problem. I'd been spending several hours, I thought, concentrating, using my System 2. Oh, I didn't know about System 2 at the time. Consciously working on a problem, going round and round, getting nowhere. Finally, I gave up. I said, I'm going to sleep. I can't do any more. In the morning, when I woke up, in the shower, bingo, there was the solution. There it was. What I had been struggling to find, what I had been working hard to uncover, there it was. It just appeared like magic. So I can't see you, but if I could, I would ask you, have you ever had an experience like that? When you worked so hard on something and then you left it, you either went to sleep, got up to go get a cup of coffee, went outside to walk, take a break, talk to someone. You left the problem behind, you left it. And when you did, bingo, there it was. Well, now you know how that happens. Angels do not descend in the night saying, Linda, the answer is... No, your System 1 has been working on it. Your System 1 is so much better, so much faster than System 2. It just needs a way to communicate with you. And now science is telling us that one of the ways that can happen is to take a break, stand up, do something else, go for a walk, go to sleep. Taking a break allows communication between System 1 and System 2, and System 1 probably already has the problem solved and is waiting for a way to communicate. You just have to get out of the way. It sounds like magic, mumbo jumbo, but now there's an enormous amount of evidence, scientific evidence, that shows how these two pieces of our brain work. And we need to learn a better way of thinking. People have known this for a long time. Scientists, mathematicians, creative individuals, artists, writers. This is a quote from the inventor of the Post-it note who said, I back away from conscious thought. I turn the problem over to my unconscious mind. It will scan a broader array of patterns and find some new close fits from other information stored in my brain. Somehow he knew before Thinking Fast and Slow had been published. Somehow he knew that if he just left it, that part of his brain would continue to work on the problem and would let him know the innovative, creative solution that he was trying to find. System 1 is the creative part of our brain. And those solutions can sometimes be enormous. It's not just yes or no, or the answer is 42. There are stories from mathematicians, scientists. Beethoven used to take a walk while he was composing, and he told stories of seeing an entire symphony appear as though by magic. Complete novels, the periodic table, the structure for the carbon ring were all created in this way. I often tell about the talks I'm giving to my husband, and it's amazing to me that he still listens, even though we've been married for many decades. We are both musicians, and we have a lot of music. We direct several orchestras. I had a special piece of music I was trying to find, and I looked in all our filing cabinets, and I couldn't find it. I yelled at my husband saying, I can't find this piece of music. I know it must be here. Did you put it somewhere? He came in and said, no, I didn't move the music. I didn't know you were looking for it. And I said, well, I'm going to turn this place upside down. I'm going to find this piece of music. And he came over to me. He put his arm around my shoulders. And he said, Linda, just leave it. Just leave it. Hand it over to System 1. Don't you hate that? When your own husband knows more about what you're talking about than you do? I forgot myself. I was willing to spend hours looking for a piece of music, and instead I went back to work, started on another problem, and sure enough, bingo. About an hour later, I remembered where the music was, why I put it there, so that I would remember where it was and it would make it easier to find. System 1 is an underused part of our brain. We always want to get in the way. We always want to override it with System 2. We always want to consciously spend an enormous amount of time solving problems when we could hand them over and let System 1 do it in the background. Of course, System 2 is useful. It's the only part of our brain that can solve really complicated math problems, fill out complicated forms. It's the part that reads. It's the part that's listening now. It goes to meetings. It hears podcasts. Whatever you say, pay attention. That's what you're doing. You're paying cognitive effort toward the use of System 2. So let's stop doing that. And in particular, with brainstorming. It's an idea that came about in the 1950s. And even though there has been considerable evidence, lots of research since that time that shows clearly it doesn't work. That when you put people in a room and ask them to be creative, they don't come up with either the number of or the quality of ideas that they would if they just had a chance to work on their own, let their minds wander, hand it over to System 1. What do we do now? What system are we using now? System 2. We lock people in a room and we say, all right, guys, you have 1 hour or 2 hours. Be creative. And we're calling on the uncreative, the slow, the linear parts of our brain to solve innovative problems. We know that when you put people in a room, you're going to run into all kinds of psychological difficulties, including groupthink and social loafing. I'm going to skip the rest of this slide because you have to read it. We know that when people work on their own, if they have the chance to hand over problems to System 1, at least overnight, working alone on their own time, putting the idea in the background, letting it come up with good ideas, that they come up with more ideas and that they are more creative. So here's my recommendation for teams I work with. This is not cast in stone because I know that groups, as soon as I leave, they begin experimenting with it and tweaking it, and that's exactly what you should do. We start out by sending everybody the problem statement and making sure everyone understands, and then we say, don't consciously think about this. Think about it in the background. Hand it over to System 1. And we allow at least at 1 overnight so that people can sleep on it. And as they come up with ideas, we collect them. And then we send the collected ideas out to everyone and we go through another iteration. Here's what everybody else has come up with. Don't consciously think about it. Hand it over to your System 1. At least overnight. Now come up with some more ideas. We know that when people get together in a meeting, they're very good at focusing, prioritizing, converging. That's what the meeting should be used for. After you've allowed a couple of iterations for people to just hand over the problem to their System 1, then get them together in a room. Then let them prioritize ideas, come up with the top 2 or the top 3. That's what groups of people are good at: converging, deciding, prioritizing. But as far as creativity, coming up with new thoughts and ideas, groups of people do not work well. So you should experiment. Try using your System 1. Instead of putting people together, and ask them to consciously, using System 2, come up with innovative solutions. And of course, the big benefit for us now is this works really well for distributed teams. It works really well for remote teams because you're asking people to, on their own time, using their own System 1s, come up with great ideas and then have a very short group meeting where you converge. I hope you'll try it. And I hope you'll let me know, how does that experiment work for you? I'm a believer in continuous experiments. That's what life is all about. I hope it never ends. Thanks for your time and attention. I don't know if you have any questions, but I'll be happy to answer any.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, Linda. That was a great presentation. I know that it gave me some things to think about.
To think about.
Yes, to think about. That's the exact point. So see if we have any questions on the chat for you. Is it important how to ask your system one, or how do you do that?
You don't have to ask it. System one's already working on it.
Good point. Yeah, that makes sense. So, so in my brain here, if the way that we tend to do things now isn't really working, I mean, basically, if you're not solving the problem, you kind of get the advice, why don't you think harder on it, right? Or more, right? You just like focus better. You're probably not focusing, right? How do we break out of that kind of thinking?
I think it takes practice. I know I told you the story about finding the music.
Yeah.
We all fall victim because the conscious mind is the part that talks to us all day long.
Yeah.
It begins to talk to us as soon as we wake up. And so we think that's what thinking is.
Uh-huh.
And it's a very natural, a very intuitive thing to believe that that's how you solve problems.
Because we're conscious about it.
Because we're aware of it. And
Yep.
we're not aware. I mean, if you think about it, system one is in charge of your blood pressure.
Yeah.
It's in charge of your breathing.
That's true.
It can multitask.
Yep.
It can handle. In fact, there are people now trying to measure the limits of system one, and it seems to have none. That
Wow.
is,
Okay.
you can keep adding to the burden of system one. Think of all the things it already does for you.
That's true.
It can do so much more.
So do you know, or do you have any insights into why our brains are so broken? That when let's say that you're trying to remember something, you're like, oh, I need to buy milk, right? And then you go, you go all the day, you go and remember yourself to buy milk. And then you go to the store and you're like, you're walking into the store, milk. And then you go into the store and you buy 15 things. You walk straight past the milk, right? And then you buy 25 other things. You spend a half hour in the store. You go to the registry. You check out. You're standing with your grocery bags going out of the store, and you're like, milk. Why is our brain so broken?
System two was not designed, if we could use that word. I don't like it, but system two did not evolve to remember milk. That's not why it's there.
Uh-huh.
System two, it seems, was really designed to help you change. It allows you to step back and say, let me think about that consciously.
Mm-hmm.
Because system two is kind of mired in the past. It knows all the patterns, all your expertise, all your experience, the way things have been done. So system two seems to be the gateway to changing that. It wasn't evolved to remember milk. Now, I can see that J.B. Rainsberger is on this call.
Yes.
And I cite an article that he wrote many years ago. Maybe he won't even remember. But he said to testers, write it down.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking about exactly the same thing. Your system two not only can't remember, that's not what it does. It can't remember, but it's not even going to make an effort. So if you don't write it down, you're going to forget.
That is a great
Right, JB?
Yes. All right. Speaking of JB, it's not his turn coming up. But thank you again, Linda. That was great. It was wonderful having you. And we really very much enjoyed your presentation. And so thanks. Thank you.